Great. All right. Thank you once again, Rishad, for joining me on this conversation on leading with storytelling. I'll make introductions, but I always like to ask my guests to how they would like to be introduced. But just to give people a little context as to who you are, if there are people who are meeting you for the first time, how could they not know you? But I will still, out of courtesy, make a formal introduction of you.
Sure.
So Rishad Tobaccowala is a renowned business leader, author, and futurist who has been at the forefront of the digital transformation in the marketing and advertising industry. As the former chief growth officer and chief strategist of Publicis Groupe, one of the largest marketing and communications companies in the world, Rishad has played a pivotal role in shaping the future of the industry. With over 40 years of experience, Rishad is known for his insightful perspectives on the evolving landscape of technology, consumer behavior, and the changing role of marketing. He's the author of the acclaimed book, Restoring the Soul of Business, Staying Human in the Age of Data, which explores how companies can navigate the digital age while maintaining their human touch. In our conversation today, Rishad will share his unique insights on the future of marketing, the power of storytelling in today's world, and the importance of balancing innovation with human-centric values. Whether you're a marketing professional, a business leader, or simply someone interested in the intersection of technology and human behavior, you're sure to find Rishad's insights both thought-provoking and inspiring. So let's dive in and hear from one and only Rishad Tobaccowala. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much for having me on your show.
So how do you prefer? I know this is a little bit straight jackets, but how do you prefer to be introduced?
Well, I would say that I today help people see, think, and feel differently about how to grow themselves, their teams, or their business, is what I do.
Awesome. I think that's a great segue into. I'd like to just reiterate that the inspiration for reaching out to you, seeing how you have been at the forefront of advocating for the would we say reining in of the use of technology and ensuring that people think more about how technology and the tools that businesses use actually keep humans and people at the center of their values while going about their businesses.
Yeah, so I am a big believer in technology. I am a person who understands the importance of data, mathematics, and outcomes. And on the other hand, I believe that technology, data, mathematics, and outcomes should not themselves be idolized. They should be understood. They should be learned. But they are at the service of ensuring that people can get better, do better, and live better. And if technology is a handmaiden to better living, then you should understand the people who actually live those lives and integrate the technology to support that versus thinking that the technology itself is the key. So, I have basically the theme of my first book, Restoring the Soul of Business, was staying human in the age of data. And the book continues to be very popular 4 years out, sells a lot, because a lot of people now are reading the subheadline as staying human in an age of AI.
Yeah. It's more like it's subconscious subtext.
Yes, it's a subconscious subtext, and every individual, including every leader who yells and screams about how they're embracing AI, which they are, also to a great extent, is themselves wondering whether they will remain relevant in an age of AI.
True. True. And
And
then,
to me, the big difference is the future is AI plus HI, where HI, I guess, is human intelligence, human insight, human intuition. And those things tend to be moved by stories, which is a big thing of what you basically believe in. So, this very famous author, now unfortunately passed away about 2 years ago, her name is Joan Didion. And in one of her favorite famous books, she basically, a book of essays, she has this line which says, "We tell ourselves stories in order to live." And when you think about it, your entire life is a long narrative in trying to understand what the hell you are.
true. That's true. That's true. And it calls to not to question what the balance where the balance really lies presently. Of course, we have the doomsayers, or the doomists, who believe that given the rise of AI, we won't be too far into the future when AI will will annihilate and decimate humanity, in literally and literally. But I just wonder: is there is there a key? Is there a key? I know we call it a human centric, keeping humans in the center of business values. But is there a key and common denominator in terms as regards creating frameworks or that businesses can or business leaders can follow in ensuring that while they navigate this world and evaluate their use and to the extent to which they use technology, that they can use as their North Star?
Yes, I think the North Star is very simply this, which is think about technology as something that is essential to the furthering of humanity. That we are here today because of things like the discovery of fire, the invention of the wheel, the breakthroughs in the printing press, electricity, the banking system. But every one of those, when you look back and you see which of those survived and which of those succeeded, including modern things like Apple and Google and Netflix, all of them helped us connect to better lives. Google helps us connect to better search results. Apple helps us connect to everybody. Meta helps us connect all, I mean, Apple helps us connect all the time. Meta helps us connect to everybody. And so if you frame everything by asking, is this if there's a North Star, it's asking the following questions. I call it SAVE. Are we solving a problem or are we trying to sell a product? A is accessible. Is what we're doing easy to buy, easy to understand? V, value. Does it provide a value to somebody? And does it have a sense of values versus it's just an extraction of money business? And finally, E, experience. What is the experience like? So solution, access, value, experience. Look at every technology and say, is this going to help us solve, access, value, or experience with people?
That's really powerful. I'd like to take it just backtrack a little bit. Just before we started recording, I was talking about your career trajectory. But I've seen that we more or less you are lauded to have this very deep and long career experience in the advertising industry. And I just want to ask, what's been your drive? Why didn't you at any point in time leave to take up academics, or or maybe even management consulting? What's the drive? What keeps you motivated to drive conversations and advances in the advertising industry?
Well, the answer is that I actually left again and again, but I stayed in the same company as I left again and again. So if you look at my career and you go to my LinkedIn profile, you will see 10 different company names. I started my career at an advertising agency called Leo Burnett. I then launched a interactive agency called Giant Step. Then I helped work with a team to unbundle the media company and create something called Starcom. I was then the chairman of companies like Digitas and Razorfish, and was the chief strategist of Publicis. So I'm just giving you 6 or 7 brand names right there.
Exactly.
And so what happens is I often tell people, if you are fortunate to be in a company that is growing and in a company that likes you, if you stay long enough, you can end up doing pretty much what you want, but within the company. And in effect, the company that I joined, which was Leo Burnett, had 1,500 employees, 1,000 in the United States and 500 outside, primarily in Europe. And we probably had 1 engineer. The company that I still have some relationship with, which is Publicis, is 106,000 people. The largest number of employees outside the United States are in India. And out of the 106,000 people, over 20,000 people are engineers. I joined one company and I finished my career in a completely different company. And so I always tell people, you don't have to necessarily leave to learn new things or build new careers. Sometimes you do, but it's often, if you can grow in a company, you should stay. And I've written this piece on my Substack called Should I Stay or Should I Go? And the key thing I will tell people is this: don't necessarily look at how much money you make or how much money you can get somewhere else. Just look at 2 things. 3 things. Number 1 is, do you like your boss? Do you like your leaders? If you got a great boss, fantastic, or a manager or a leader. Number 2 is, do you agree with the values of the company? Do you feel that you're in a company that you believe has the right values? You're not in an Enron or something like that. And third, and most importantly, are you growing? And if you are growing and you like the values of the company and your boss is good, what the hell are you doing running around trying to go get another job for? Because I always tell people the grass is greener on the other side because it's fertilized with bullshit.
Okay. Excuse me for laughing.
Right.
Okay, I've never heard that one. Well, thank you so much for that. And I do look at. I often wonder when I look at people's profiles, and I wonder what the drive is. But yeah, thank you so much for putting that in perspective. That was
right.
Really...
And remember, the other thing is when you see someone with a lot of different moves around, you should ask another question: not why are they leaving, but how come they never stayed? And so often when people are moving from place to place, it's not because they're moving from place to place through choice. They're being asked to leave places.
It's quite curious because a few years ago, I do believe it was either Deloitte or McKinsey that did a study, and they found that the average number of years that a CMO stays in a company is just around about 3 years. They never stay any longer than 3 years, and it in some ways it maybe serves, and this is a danger of data, I guess. It's more or less served as a validation for some people to actually stay just 3 years and leave, and then again it was quite dangerously a reflection of something or some reason that CMOs or marketing leadership are not taken as seriously as they could or they should.
Yeah, so there are a couple of reasons of this. One is I always tell people you should spend at least 3 years in a job. And while I did move around in lots of different roles in my companies, I spent 3 to 4 years in each role. And the interesting thing about 3 years is it takes about a year for you to learn your job. Then it's a year when you're really good at your job. And then the third year, you're so good that you can actually hand it over to somebody and do something else. So what I also always look at is when a CMO leaves, and that number for CMOs, the 3.5 years, is an average, it's not a median. There are CMOs who stay much shorter, and most of those CMOs who stay much shorter either figure out that they're not a fit, or the company says you're not a real CMO. That's one reason. The second reason is that CMOs sometimes are not actually leaving, they're just moving to different roles and actually becoming more important roles, like a chief strategy officer, a chief growth officer, a chief experience officer. They do things like that. And the third is many CMOs spend a long time. So for instance, until just a couple of years ago, the CMO of Adobe had been there for 15 years. Lorraine, who is the CMO of Google, has been there for 10, 15 years. If you look at the chief brand officer of Procter & Gamble, he's been there 10, 15 years. And so what tends to basically happen is we look at these fly-by-night operators who either aren't real CMOs, and they basically are moving from place to place pretending they're a CMO. Or second is, and then the last thing is, sometimes the CMO does not have enough data to prove that they're actually creating value. And so they're easy to basically blame for when things go wrong. But what I'm basically seeing is it's not just the CMO. Look at the CEO. The CEO's roles are becoming shorter. So the only people who stay for a long time, as far as I can tell, are CFOs. And I guess they run the numbers, so they make the numbers look good for themselves.
I agree. I agree, and it actually paints a more or less a precarious picture for chief storytelling officers in a sense, because it's becoming harder to, I wouldn't say harder, but it's becoming, or has been hard, to actually demonstrate the value of storytelling to an organization that values quantity over quality, or quantitative over qualitative data. And I think this brings us back to more or less how we keep organizations focused on their values, and how they drive that focus, or actually hone that focus through effective storytelling. Do you see, how do we say it? This actually borders on future of work, or the future generally. How do you see storytelling officers, and I'm careful to say storytelling officers, because instead of saying CEOs or CMOs, which I believe could be, a storytelling officer could actually be anyone. But how do you see organizations, expressing or even storytelling officers, demonstrating value of their stories through data?
Well, what they basically do is, there is a lot of data that supports storytelling. And, I've always basically said that marketing in many ways and is basically and a story is sort of data driven storytelling and data driven souls. And so to a great extent, what they basically do is they look at the following: the most valuable brands in the world, whether it is Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, Apple, Disney, if you look at them, you cannot explain their success based on just logistics. You can't explain it on products and ingredient. What you can differentiate them is on provenance, history, and storytelling. And in effect, if storytelling did not make any sense and it was only about data, then every CMO should resign immediately. Why do I need a CMO? If the data is going to give me the answer, let me save some money, get rid of the CMO. And 7 out of 10 decisions that we all make are non-data driven. Having kids is non-data driven. Having a watch when you have a much better watch in your phone is not data driven. And so when people tell me it's all about data driven stuff, I say, tell me the exact opposite. Tell me how data actually creates brands. Data just measures how powerful a brand is. I haven't seen how data creates a brand. And if data actually finds the right person at the right place at the right time, that's good. But then you have to still tell them a story.
That's real on the money, as they say. I've seen a few brands. So let me start by Adobe, and in a sense, and you can correct me, you're very hands-on in the industry, more hands-on than I am. So correct me if I'm wrong. I've seen how Adobe has changed its more or less its proposition or its positioning over time, just by tweaks in the stories that it tells. It's gone from merely being an enterprise facing organization to a creator facing organization or brand. And I believe that they've actually now more like begun to swim in an area where they are winning by the stories that they tell. Do you see other players as well who are making these tweaks to the story and position to their positioning through tweaks in their storytelling?
Yeah, I would say that Domino's Pizza basically is one of the most extraordinary companies that retold its story. Basically, it says, hey, our pizza isn't so good. We're going to reimagine our 50-year-old recipe. And then they basically told themselves a story about, hey, we're not just a pizza company, we're a pizza logistics and delivery service. And they have done extremely well in that form. Similarly, companies that have repositioned themselves all sort of over the world, and you kind of look at, okay, what's a really successful sort of brand is companies basically like a Microsoft repositioned itself from being focused on desktop computers and Windows to basically unleashing the potential of people and enterprises, and as a result of that, basically said, we're just going to unleash our potential and we're going to be everywhere, and we're going to make our software for every platform and have it available on the cloud, and we're going to basically partner with companies like OpenAI. So in effect, an underlying story and an underlying narrative explains the company. And look at McDonald's, they're doing particularly well. Part of it is because they have basically aligned with and seized the culture. Obviously, they have a great app, they've made their stores better, etc., but they have to tell these extraordinary sort of stories. And so that's what I see.
Awesome. When we talk about, so we have, I like how you drew the reference to Joan Didion's book, just to. Well, I wonder what are you reading lately?
So I read a lot of books simultaneously. I tend to read.
Oh, you too?
Yeah, 6 and 8 books simultaneously. I recently finished the book behind me, which just won the Pulitzer Prize for best nonfiction on Martin Luther King. It's called King. It's an extraordinary book. I would strongly recommend it to people. It's very inspirational, and it's different. It's the first biography since a lot of his FBI files were opened, and you begin to sort of understand a little bit more about him as an individual. I am starting again Don Quixote, because I listened to the very famous Don Quixote, which is the very first novel that ever came out in the 1600s or 17th century. And the reason I'm doing it is because Salman Rushdie, who I'm a fan of, I listened to a podcast and they asked him, like, what should you be reading? And he basically said, if there are 3 books I would recommend, one is Don Quixote with this particular translator, which just came out. So I had the original Don Quixote, so I bought this translator. A second is, 100 Years of Solitude. And I decided I'm going to reread that because I've completely forgotten that. And so those are some of my classic books. King is my biography book. And the one I recommend to everybody with my writing is, if you can read just 1 or 2 books a year and no more than 1 or 2 books a year. If you write like nonfiction, I would read Best American Essays. And if you read a combination of fiction, nonfiction, and poetry and other stuff, I would read the Pushcart Prizes. And those two are absolutely if you would just read one book, I would read the Pushcart, if that makes sense.
Wow. That was real bold. That was real bold. I haven't actually heard anyone say actually pitch a prize. I mean, pushed any, Why do you say so? So what is it about the prize as opposed to Booker or the Pulitzer or Carol Shields?
So I think the single biggest thing that people are forgetting in this particular world is that, I mean, they really, a lot of people just don't realize that they spend so much time thinking about the food that they eat. And it's important, but why don't you think about what you feed your mind? And your quality of your life is going to be highly dependent not just on the food that you eat, but on what you feed your mind. And you can be in fantastic shape and your mind can be basically full of shit. That doesn't mean anything then.
I agree with you, brother. I agree with you. But then again, you kind of dodge that one. Are you saying that other prizes do not actually promote better thought-provoking books?
No. So what was the question again? Sorry.
So I said, why do you hold the Pushcart Prize in a higher
Okay, the reason I hold the Pushcart Prize in the highest, because the Pushcart Prize book is not a prize for one story. It's a collection of what people basically believe are the best stories, the best essays, and the best nonfiction, but interestingly, from the smaller presses of America.
Okay.
So it's basically not stories from the New Yorker or the Atlantic magazine, right? And I basically believe that some of the best writing in the world takes place outside of these very large establishments. I'm a huge fan of the New Yorker. I'm a huge fan of the Atlantic. And if you want to read those stories, you read best essays. Best essays come from there, or best short stories come from there. But if Pushcart basically says there are all these presses, smaller presses all over the world, with amazing stories and voices, let's hear from them. And part of my basic belief as someone who has been fortunate to be successful is that very successful people make the mistake of hanging out with other successful people, and we keep looking at the heavens, but the future never comes from the heaven, it comes from the slime, right? And I'm not calling small people, young people, unemployed people slime, but I'm basically saying it's the future always comes where we aren't looking. And if you actually believe in evolution, that I do, life came from the slime. It did not come from the heavens.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. Thanks for sharing that. And just to wrap up, this is us doing the warm down. So
yes.
The earlier mentioned that you mentioned actually. I remember saying that on the offline before we recorded, but you run a newsletter.
Yes.
On Substack, and I wanted to, and when I started following it, what was very interesting about it, and I do believe I took inspiration from it in the way that you used your personal photography to introduce people into the stories that you tell on your newsletters.
Yes.
And
yes.
So, question in that is, what's the place of photography in your scheme of hobbies? Let me put it that way.
So I have been a big fan of photography, and I believe that photography is what all of us can do, because now we all have a camera called our phone, even if you don't invest in a camera. Though, as you can see behind me, I actually have also very good cameras in addition to my phone or my mobile. What I basically believe is photography does the following things. It helps you see and look at things, and with a camera, you walk around, you look, and looking is a big part of learning and living. That's number one. Second is, and I've written a piece on that it helps you actually sell things better also, because you have to frame a question just like you have to frame a photograph. You then have to get enough data or different points of view, which is exposure, which is really, light, which is a combination of exposure and shutter speed. And then finally, you basically have to edit, which is decide what to say and what not to say and what to make look good and not good. So frame, expose, and edit, or frame, illuminate, and edit is what you do in photography. But frame, illuminate, and edit is the way you also think about stories.
True. It's true. Thank you, and I thank you for that and drawing that analogy as well, using that as an analogy in itself.
Yes. And that's what my thing is to all your audience and all your listeners. Every one of us is a storyteller. Just figure out what stories you want to tell. And if you don't believe you're a storyteller, you are, because in effect, if you have a partner in life, you told them a story to get them to like you.
Is there a love story in the Rishad?
Well, who knows? I've been married to the same woman for 40 years, and I told her a story. My kids still basically tell me, what the hell did she see in you? So I said, well, who the hell knows?
I'm sure that made a very interesting dinner talk.
Exactly. But thank you.
Well, Rishad, thank you so much. I think I got a lot more than I bargained for, excluding the dinner talk.
Exactly. But thank you very much for your time.
I appreciate this. Where can people meet you?
So they can, my Substack is free. It's now read by about 30,000 people every Sunday.
Awesome.
It's at rishad.substack.com. So it's rishad.substack.com. You can listen to my podcast, which is free, by just typing in What Next in Publicis Groupe on any platform in the world. And then, the only thing that I have, which you have to pay for, is I have a book, and that costs $15, and you can find it on Amazon or Walmart.com or any platform you use.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you
you
so much, Rishad. And I hope I can. I will. Next time I call on you, you would grant me the same.
Absolutely. I would love to do that, and thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much.
Perfect.